Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming this afternoon. As you know that our financial year always begins from the 1st of August to the 31st of July, and we are nearing the month of July. And given that the writ of elections has not been issued as of now, therefore we will have to prepare a budget. As you know, the writ of elections and the date of elections is the prerogative of the Honourable Prime Minister, and he will decide the date. In the meantime, of course, we have to do our job in terms of preparing a new budget for the new financial year. The new budget, ladies and gentlemen, will be delivered for the year 22-2023, will be delivered on the 15th of July this year. As you know, as per the law, we have to wait for a week after the budget is delivered, and then we have a debate on the budget itself, which we hope to have the budget approved on the 29th of July for it to come into effect from the 1st of August. We have informed the Honourable Speaker of Parliament. He is aware of the date, and of course we will then deliver the budget on the evening as per the usual practice. This budget, of course, will be premised very much on our post-pandemic recovery. As you know that given the number of policy measures we have put in place, both medical and of course fiscal policy measures that were put in place, we were able to open our borders on the 1st of December. We now have tourists flowing into the country, and the numbers in fact are looking quite good and indeed very encouraging. There are of course a number of challenges, and we have to ensure that we continue to deliver on the services that's required of us as a country in respect of tourism services, the quality of the services, and of course making sure that we are price competitive. A number of other countries, of course, have now opened up their borders. We've seen that USA no longer requires their citizens to have a test prior to entering the country after the holidays, which means there's opportunities for us. At the same time, we've seen countries like Thailand, for example, remove the restrictions they had, which also means competition for us. So we have to be very much aware of what is happening globally. Many of you would have also seen, for example, in the past couple of days, how the tourism sector in New Zealand and the services sector in New Zealand is having a number of issues with their staff. A lot of people have left, the hospitality industry. There's an article that was floating around today, you may have seen it around in the digital media space, about how a number of businesses can no longer open the same hours they used to open because they don't have enough staff. A lot of people have in fact decided not to go back to the hospitality industry in New Zealand, whether it's out of fear of COVID or whether they've found other professions to have a sustainable livelihood. At the same time, you would have seen last week, for example, the waiting time in state of Victoria in Australia in the public hospital was about 24 hours. And again, there's a situation they have in respect of not having enough nurses. What this means is that a lot of people will be looking to poach our staff, our people, our human resources from Fiji. We have already seen that. We have seen, for example, some teachers being recruited by New Zealand because they actually have a shortage of teachers in New Zealand. In particular, for example, in specific subject areas which the teachers in New Zealand don't want to necessarily pursue. So the budget that we're going to deliver will need to address a number of those fundamental changes that are taking place globally and of course regionally. We need to of course look at incentivizing, as we announced in the budget, in the revised budget, that we are looking at the scarcity of skill sets and the retention issues within the civil service that we need to be able to address in the revised budget. Already there's some work has already started in respect of that within the Ministry of Civil Service, looking at which specific areas in the civil service, indeed overall in the country, where we need to perhaps adjust the terms and conditions of employment to ensure that we maintain the scarce skill sets and also retain people where there's a huge demand of those professions, in particular from outside of Fiji. The other issue, of course, that we will overall be assessing the policy framework, as we announced in the revised budget, is the enormous impact that the post-pandemic world has had on the cost of commodities globally. We have seen the freight costs that had increased quite substantially in some parts of the world. Freight costs had increased by about 700 to 800%. In our part of the world, we've seen, for example, freight costs from New Zealand to Fiji has perhaps gone up by about 200 to 300%. So we need to be able to understand what are the dynamics at play. This further has been exacerbated by the Ukraine-Russia war, which has had a huge impact, for example, on wheat supply globally. We have seen wheat supply shortages in parts of North Africa and various other parts of the world, in the Middle East, where there are in fact what we call bread riots, where people in fact go and buy bread. Bread is a very staple food of theirs, and because of a shortage of wheat, there's a shortage of bread, and people are queuing up for hours. In some countries, of course, people are queuing up for hours to get access to fuel. So we are very much mindful of that, and we're also mindful of the fact that it has a spillover effect in our part of the world too, where we have recently seen, for example, the price of wheat that's sold to the two flour producing companies in Fiji, Punja and Sons and FMF, also increase, and as a result of which we have seen that being passed on to the consumers. Now, we've seen a number of other commodity items that are imported where the price of things have gone up as a result of freight costs and indeed the supply-demand issues that has been exacerbated by the Russia-Ukraine war. So, ladies and gentlemen, as far as the budget is concerned, all of these factors which we had highlighted in the revised budget, we will continue to address those issues. We have, of course, as you know, made a number of announcements in the budget, in the revised budget, which has already been implemented. So, for example, we had announced about the $100 available assistance for people in Lalabalavu. We have already paid over $2 million to about 19,521 Fijians with the $100 unemployment payment. The $50 social welfare payment has already been paid, around $4.5 million to around 89,000 social welfare recipients early last week. That's already taken place. And as you also know, that we had all announced in the budget, the revised budget, how we're going to make certain medical facilities available through the private sector to ordinary Fijians who cannot afford to go and see a GP. This, of course, ensures that it reduces the waiting time. It ensures that people who may not necessarily have an emergency situation, medical emergency situation, they can go and visit a GP. We've now extended the number of GPs available. They had advertised, as you know, we had advertised and they had applied. And we now have over 40 outlets that will now be available to people all over Fiji. The list of the current medical practitioners are already on our Facebook page, but I'd like to also read out the new ones that have now joined. For example, in the Suva area, we have Positive Vibe Health Clinic, Friendly Medical Center, Oceania Hospitals, and Miot Pacific that have also joined the group of GPs that will now be available to those Fijians who normally would go to a public hospital. Maharaj Medical Center in Lodala Beach in Nasinu, and Flagstaff also. Premium Healthcare Center PT Limited in Nandera, Nakasi and Nosori. They are also available now. They've got 4 outlets. 9 Miles Medical Center in Nakasi again. Sharma's Medical Diagnostic Center in Nasinu. And again, we have an outlet of theirs, that's in Nasinu, Nakasi. Then we have in Korovo, Tailevu Family Medical. They'll also be available. In Navua, Riverside Medical Center. In Singatoka, 3 new ones have come on board. We did not have Singatoka in the last batch because Singatoka Medical Center, Girona Medical and Surgical Clinic, and Dr. Naidu's Medical Center. In Nandi, we have 3 more that have joined. That's a Diagnostic and Specialist Medical Center in Nandi Town, Arti Medical Center, and also Ali Medical Center. In Lotoka, we have 2 more outlets that have joined, a Bar Medical Center, which is also in Lotoka, and Poly Medical Center. In Bar, we have another 2 that have joined, Prestige Medical Center, Midtown Medical Center. Tavua, we have a new one. This is the first time we've got one in Tavua, WellCare Medical Center. Lambasa, we have the first one, which is Singh's Medical Clinic. And Savu-Savu, we have the first one, which is Savu-Savu Medical Center. So all of these entities, there are 43 now GPs around Fiji, and in fact some of them have got branches. For example, Premium Medical Care Center, which is Dr. Roman Chut, Dr. Losana Burua, Dr. Nico Bakani, and Dr. Manasa Namau, then Nandera Nakasi Nasori. So they have 3 outlets. So all of these will be available to members of the public. They're going online from next week. From the 20th of June. And they will now also be able to offer, as we've said, a lot more range of services. So they, apart from doing consultation, review, referral, they do dressings, other minor dressings, they give injections, multi-urine dipsticks, electrocardiogram, which is ECG, a nebulizer, people who suffer from asthma, oxygen supply, ultrasound scan, the simple sugar test that they do, and of course then if there are certain other more sophisticated samples that are required, for example your long-term blood sugar test can be done, complete blood count, basic metabolic panel, cholesterol or lipid profile, glycated hemoglobin test, liver function and renal function. All of these tests can be done by the GPs, will be available, and the members of the public don't actually have to pay a single cent. As part of that, of course, we had advertised to ask various blood testing labs that could also participate, and we're happy to say that we've received some very good proposals, and also we've been able to negotiate with them and get some very good rates. And those labs, in fact, that are now participating with us, let me read out those names to you. They are Health Plus Diagnostics PT Limited, which is in Nambua, Pacific Laboratory Specialist PT Limited, which is in Rewanga, Western Medical Laboratories, which is in Ba, Medical Laboratory Diagnostic PT Limited, which they have branches in Lotoka, Nakasi, and Nandi, and also Ba. And we have VenMed Labs, which is, of course, in Suva, Samambula, Nandi, Lotoka, and Lambasa too. So we have got some very good arrangements in place with these entities. We also announced in the budget that we'll be reaching out to dentists. As you know, that as a result of the pandemic, a lot of people weren't able to access dental services. So we've now again called for expression of interest, and we have some practitioners that are predominantly at the moment at this stage, all of them are in the Suva Nakasi area. There is only one in Lotoka, which is Dr. Suresh Chandra. We have the Nakasi Dental Clinic in Nakasi, Makoi Dental Clinic also in Nakasi, Stunning Smile Dental, which is in Ratumara Road, Nambua, and Daily Care Dental, which is actually in the South Mall in Rodwell Road near the bus stand. So you can go to these dentists. They'll be able to do extractions. They can do temporary fillings, they do permanent fillings, and of course they can do oral examination if you think you need to get oral examination done. And again, government will be paying all the fees for you in that respect. We'd like to thank Fiji Care that has partnered with us. As you know, that they also provide medical insurance cover, so we've used them to use their services to be able to vet all the claims made by the labs, the doctors, and the dentists before we actually pay them out. So there's a point of verification, and they have the expertise to be able to do so. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the announcements that I wish to make in regarding of what we have done in terms of what we had announced in the budget. As you know, that by going and seeing a GP and having your fees paid, no money comes out of your pocket. By getting a tooth extracted, dental filling pulled out, dental filling done, you don't actually fork out any money from your pocket too. This is providing or alleviating the cost of living for many members of the public. We, of course, will be building upon this particular philosophy, this particular outlook as far as our fiscal policy is concerned in respect to the budget going forward. As you know, we've seen a number of challenges You may have seen, I think I saw an advertisement in the Fiji Sun where recruitment agents from Australia were advertising looking for chefs. Any chef with more than 3 years experience, they're offering about 80 to 120,000 Australian dollars for them. What it could mean that there could be a shortage of chefs in Fiji. So we had discussions on the weekend with the Fiji National University to look at what type of courses in an expedited fashion can we offer our people so they can also become trained and be able to provide services. We have got about 3 projects on foot at the moment between Lautoka and Nadi, about $200 million worth of construction that is about to start. Now that will require a lot of people to work on the construction site. That will require a lot of expertise, and we need to have that level of expertise and train people to be able to ensure that those projects, those constructions are actually delivered on time. So there is a lot of movement as you see in the region. We have also seen, as you know, there's a shortage of labor in Australia too. A lot of people are getting recruited not just for fruit picking, but also in the aged care services too. So there's a lot of dynamics at play in respect of, as I said, we want to be able to address the impact on the commodities that has been driven by many factors, in particular the pandemic and of course the war it's in Russia and Ukraine. So I'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen, open for any questions, and I can add some things a bit later on too. Thank you. So sorry, before I forget, we're also calling for public submissions from members of the public for the budget. As I speak, it's already gone up on our Facebook page. We would like members of the public to please give their submissions by the 30th of June, which would be the last date. You can email, you can post, you can hand deliver. We also will be holding public consultations. As you know, we've been doing this since 2016 or so, and we'll go out again. We've had a number of requests from members of the rural public who want us to reach out to them, go there and make presentations. We won't unfortunately be able to go to every single corner of Fiji for the public consultations. But no doubt we'll be asking, when we do go to rural areas, if people can congregate in one place in a particular location so we can cover as many of those areas as possible. Do you have any questions? I know some people had earlier on asked some questions. We were at the earlier function. They don't seem to be here. They wanted to ask some questions.
Sir, Tanjay,
yes.
As you alluded to the targeted measures that were announced in the revised budget, can we just look forward to further policies or measures that can cushion up the impact? For example, the basket of goods that are zero rated, could further increase, or other measures?
Well, obviously, the zero-rated VAT items will continue. It has to continue, given the fact that we still need to have stability as far as the commodity prices are concerned. But the budget itself will be very much focused on seeing how we can mitigate those risks that people face. But you also have to remember that we have to also continue with infrastructure development too. There are a lot of people who still want access to electricity, water, and we have expanded. You would have seen, for example, a lot of the roads are getting fixed up around, those of you who live around in the Suvarnasori corridor, the smaller streets that have not been fixed up for quite some time are getting all fixed up. And this was, as you know, part of the overall plan which we had announced last year, that the moment we have fiscal flexibility, we'll be able to get FRA to do, for example, those works. And it's critically important. We're getting a lot of positive feedback from members of the public, that many of the streets that are on the sides, as opposed to just the main roads, are getting fixed up also. Street lights are being put in, because we also have only one window of opportunity. This is the dry season, and you would have seen the amount of saturation we had during the cyclone period. It's too much rain, and it does limit the amount of work that FRA can do. So this window of opportunity is there, and the cyclone season again starts in November. We're only a few months away from that cyclone season. So FRA is really geeing up all the works that it can do during this dry season. And as you know, even in the dry season, we're still getting rain. But you'll see, wherever possible we find the fiscal space, we're carrying out those works. It has also helped us with the fact that the tourism numbers are looking good. The revenue streams, of course, from that is looking buoyant too. Fiji Airways, if you talk to anybody, if they traveled recently, is actually flying on fairly good loads. So, there's a lot of positive change in that respect, but we cannot simply rest on that. We need to be strategic about it. We need to have a long-term goal about it. So we've also been looking at other industries, as we have mentioned, that we need to invest, for example, in what we call a clean manufacturing subdivision that we're looking at. This has been on the cards for some time, of course, because the cyclones got delayed, but FNPF is now coming on board. A number of our development partners are talking to us about it. Because some of the countries in the region want to have manufacturing closer to home. In the same way, for example, we have the BPO sector. We've had some discussions, the PS and I, we had some discussions together with the team with a fairly large company that's very keen to enter the Fijian market. There's certain OECD rules that they need to adhere to, and we're trying to see in what level of flexibility we can apply so we can entice them to come to Fiji and create that number of jobs that's required, of course, in this space, because we have to ensure that the young people, the graduates, also continue to get jobs. We've also seen a demand for people who have completed their graduate studies, who want to go overseas, but they have their loans to pay. So we've given some flexibility in terms of the guarantors, etc. But the fact is that many of them are committed, of course, to paying their debt. But we also have to look at what kind of further flexible arrangements we can have in that space to be able to ensure that they also get livelihoods and be able to address those issues.
So should members of the public anticipate a decrease of prices of food in the next budget?
I wish I could say yes, because we don't set the price of food. As I'm sure you would know, I find your question interesting because, as I've said a number of times, that we don't set the price of flour. We price control it. Once it comes into Fiji, and that price control will continue. But of course, imported items, we don't have any control as to what price it lands in Fiji. The same way with fuel. We recently seen last week that the OPEC countries are currently talking about releasing more barrels of oil in a day. Now, if that happens, then you will see that perhaps with the supply, the price could come down. But we're keeping our fingers crossed. We have absolutely no control over it. India, for example, which is one of the largest wheat producers in the world, also stopped the export of wheat because they're concerned about that they should have enough wheat themselves. So they've stopped the export of wheat, which means there's again less supply. If you follow, and I hope all you journalists don't become very parochial and only look at Fiji. If you follow, for example, Australian news at the moment, there's a big debate going on between the different states because the price of gas has gone up significantly in some of the states, where many of these private companies who export gas get higher price when they export gas. So they are not supplying enough to the domestic market, or as a result, the price of the gas domestically has gone up. Certain states like Western Australia has a requirement that there should be some local gas supply made first, so the gas price can be controlled and in fact become a bit more attractive for Western Australians. But in other states where they're extracting gas, they have a big problem with that. So I would urge all of you to please, when you talk about and you want to have a serious discussion or write articles or write stories on commodity prices, don't just look at Fiji. You need to understand what is happening internationally, what is happening in other countries. The fact that there's a litre of fuel in New Zealand is more expensive than in Fiji, but of course Australia is cheaper than Fiji. Why is that the case? So you have to understand that before you try and write articles on the economy, or even when a politician stands up and makes a comment, you need to be able to understand what they're saying. Is it true, or is it whistling in the wind? You need to understand that. Because this is a very serious situation we have globally speaking. And it's not time for political point scoring as far as commodity pricing is concerned. And unfortunately we have seen a lot of people, just because it's election time, trying to score political points out of it. Similarly, I was sent some questions, I think it was by Fiji Times, that I met the young lady at the earlier function today, saying, the politicians are saying, why are we borrowing if you have 9 years of growth? Again, it's such a simplistic interpretation. Australia has had 23 years of growth. 23 years of growth. No, regression in the growth. 20 years, 23 years ago, modest sum, 1-2%, 1.5%, yet they grew for 23 years. Their debt, because of the pandemic, has almost doubled. So again, I get rather flabbergasted when we have people making these statements, but at the same time, some of the journalists just simply parrot what they're saying as opposed to applying their own analysis. So, we have to look at growth does not necessarily mean that, you don't borrow. I mean, if tomorrow, yes, we can stop borrowing, but what will it mean? Will it mean higher taxes? Because you have to make the revenue somehow. Will it mean that you're not going to stop building any roads? Will it mean that you're not going to increase, services, medical services? Does that mean everybody will pay for medical services? So you have to understand the way the economy works and the way budgets work. So these are very simplistic, what we call political point scoring, and unfortunately some of the media organizations just simply parrot it without thinking. So we have a serious job to do. We obviously understand the dynamics and have to be able to ensure that we deliver a budget that will, cater for those people who are on the margins of society. We need to continuously do that. We have to ensure that there are new challenges for individuals. There, of course, have been some opportunities for people too. As we said, the BPO sector has grown 3,000 jobs in the last 2 years. So those people who weren't employed in the BPO sector are now employed in the BPO sector. And we want that space to grow.
So we're also seeing your comments in relation to the DPP and the Fijian Law Society labeling Minister Akbar's comments as inappropriate. So she had said that she would lobby for harsher or stricter penalties. Or she would lobby the judiciary for harsher and stricter penalties. Your comments on that?
I haven't, in fact, I tried to get in touch with Mr. Akbar. I have not been able to speak to her, but I did have a brief conversation with the DPP while she was playing tennis the other day. I went to pick up my kids from Albert Park, and I said, what's this about? Because I had just heard through the media. I understand CFL and others have reported on it. And he said, well, about what you have said, that she says you lobby. Look, I mean, I think a lot of these issues, when it's what we call a tit for tat, toing and froing, and can get blown out of proportion. I don't, obviously, did not hear Minister Akbar say those words, nor have I read everything that the DPP has responded to. But of course, the fact is that the minister is responsible for curbing domestic violence. She's very much concerned about domestic violence. She's very much concerned about sexual assaults, as we all are as a government. Our Prime Minister has made, obviously a number of bold statements around that. And as you also know, those of you who may not know, we used to have what we call the penal code that was in Fiji since for the past 100 years or so, that did not even recognize domestic violence as a separate, offense. We now have the Domestic Violence Act, which actually specifically states about domestic violence being a separate offense. Those of you who may know lawyers, I mean, even when I worked at the DPP's office, if you bashed up your wife, it was known as common assault. And common assault was what you call a reconcilable offense. So many women who did get beaten up by their husbands in particular, or boyfriends or partners, they were discouraged from actually taking cases. They were discouraged sometimes previously by the police to file even complaints about it. And those ones who did get through, when they went in, a lot of the magistrates said, well, you're married, why don't you go and settle it? So many people actually did not report those offenses. Similarly, as you know, that now you can get a life sentence for sexual assault. So, the penalties have, of course, significantly increased. The judiciary, I understand, has had, judicial training for over a period of time. And perhaps the minister was also referring to that, about, judicial training, about sensitization, about being aware of the dynamics at play, the power play between the genders, etc. So, I think a lot of the times when you have independent officers, you have the executive and independent officer, sometimes it's good to just pick up the phone and have a chat, have a talanoa, as opposed to kind of dragging out in the media. The ultimate objective, I'm sure, of the DPP is to ensure that people who commit an offense get prosecuted successfully. In the same way, from the executive, we want to ensure that this particular offenses like, sexual offenses, sexual assaults, in particular on children, and also, of course, domestic violence does get, reduced, gets curbed, and be able to, get rid of the scourge from our society. Any other questions?
Sorry, sir, there was another issue that the DPP highlighted, was the Minister were meeting one of the witnesses of the Bolivoli homicide, and that could have a major impact in the case.
You can't expect me to comment on that. I mean, that's a matter for the prosecution and of course the defense to deal with.
So just finally on this issue, you'll be seeking an audience with Minister Akbar on this issue?
No, we are colleagues. We talk to each other.
So can you give us an update about Fiji first? Have people shown interest in joining?
I'm wearing my Minister for Economy hat. We can talk about Fiji First at the Fiji First office. Okay? Okay, thank you.